Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Jock and Jill podcast. This is your boy Guru from Cold Coffee TV, here with your girl Joan Madden, the Gridiron Goddess. Joan, how you feeling this morning?
Everything's a lot better this morning. You know, we had a pretty interesting weekend, as many of you all know. We kind of do our recordings like the 5 days a week. So we didn't record anything late Friday, but it kind of worked out in our favor that we didn't, because as you all know, a large part of the East Coast was affected by Hurricane Matthew. Of course, it wasn't as devastating as the Caribbean, Haiti, and the Bahamas, but there was still a lot of flooding and things that took place here late Friday night and early on Saturday. So it's great to finally see some sun, and we're rebounding and stuff. Some citizens and residents and stuff lost power. There was issues with water and stuff like that. It could have been a lot worse. Thankfully it wasn't. Again, we didn't have anything like the Caribbean did, but still we got blasted on the East Coast. So it's been an interesting weekend, but it's nice to still have our health. And of course we still have football too. So it's just nice to get back to some normalcy. And of course a lot of people might not know this about you, Guru, but you know, you have family down in the Fayetteville area, and of course Fayetteville it was a huge impact, Fayetteville area, with the flooding and the impacts from Hurricane Matthew. So how's your family? How's everything coming along with your family down there? Everybody safe? Everybody good?
And from the information that I retained from my family and everything, everybody's okay. Everything's good. Everyone successfully made it through another one of those nasty storms. So that's a blessing in itself.
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. But again, we want to send our prayers and thoughts out to everyone that was affected by Hurricane Matthew. And thankfully, again, this may not be the case for everyone, but a lot of people like ourselves, we turn to like football to be therapeutic. You know, some people look at music, and some people look at writing and things like that to be very therapeutic. So the fact that we had some great football games on yesterday helped out a lot to return things again back to a sense of normalcy and to help us get through things. And of course, this storm was called Hurricane Matthew, very destructive, but coincidentally, there were some other huge things that happened with the name Matthew when it pertains to football, including Matthew Ryan and the Falcons going to Denver and knocking off the previously undefeated Broncos. Then you had Matthew Stafford and the Lions knocking off the previously undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, and even Clay Matthews of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, he didn't have like monster stats, but he had like a huge sack towards the end of the game when the Giants were kind of trying to come back and had the momentum kind of swing back in their favor. But he had that huge sack to kind of put a screeching halt to the comeback that the Giants were trying to have. Of course, this is not anywhere compared to what Hurricane Matthew did, but there was some guys named Matthew in the NFL who caused some type of destruction as well. So with those three games, Guru, what do you make, especially with the two teams that are no longer undefeated? I mean, now there was one, of course, the Minnesota Vikings retained being undefeated. What do you make of like those two games with the Broncos, Super Bowl champions, catching their first loss and their first loss at home? They hadn't lost since December also. Then looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, which of course we saw maybe some games on down the line because they're about to have a very brutal schedule for the remaining 12 weeks of the season. So they're about to get to a very brutal part of their schedule. And it was almost like maybe they should have definitely won that game because they are about to get into the meat of their schedule. And then the Green Bay Packers coming off of a bye, getting that win over the Giants, who have now lost 3 straight. So break down those games. What are your thoughts on these teams? What kind of questions are now needing to be answered, and what kind of questions got answered from those teams?
The situation with the Falcons in Denver, the first thing I thought about is the fact that, me being an Oakland Raiders fan, I was happy that they did us that favor, knocking those Broncos off. So now we're tied with the Denver Broncos for the lead in the division.
Right.
A bit of irony, is that the Raiders lost to the Falcons as well. So our one loss came against the Falcons. The Broncos' one loss came against the Falcons. So I guess that suggests that the Falcons probably are really legitimate title contender this season.
Mm-hmm.
Not suggesting that the Raiders are, but, I know that we're a much improved team. But the Broncos definitely are, and they were knocked off by the same Falcon team that we lost to. However, it was, it's a little more convincing. So I would say that, I would have a little bit of concern about how good Denver really is, considering that this game, the Falcons controlled this whole game. This was not a game that they just went out there and won at the end like they did against, my team, the Oakland Raiders. This was a game that they controlled the whole game. Like, they were up 13-3, and then it got to be like 20-3, and then the Broncos put some points on the board. So it was kind of a game where they convincingly went into Denver and manhandled the champs. So I think that it's safe to suggest that the Broncos definitely not a lock to win this division, and are definitely not a lock to win the Super Bowl again. As far as Matthew Stafford and the Lions knocking off the Philadelphia Eagles, after looking over that schedule with you as well, we were both saying that 3-0 record was fool's gold. So, we kind of expected for them to go back to being who they really are at some point. I guess it just started a week early. As far as Clay Matthews and the Green Bay Packers, well, this was based on my prediction in our previous podcast. I predicted that Green Bay would come out of this bye week more focused, and have some of the problems that they were having fixed, and that's exactly who they were at Lambeau on Sunday Night Football. Considering that Aaron Rodgers looked a little bit better tonight, he did throw 2 interceptions, but a guy who throws 48 times in a game, he's possibly gonna throw interceptions, but Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson did look a little bit better tonight than they've looked in the first few games. Eddie Lacy looked pretty good as well. Green Bay's definitely looking like a team that's gonna start trying to put together some wins and become a little bit better.
Well, they better with Minnesota being 5-0.
Well, there was no surprise there in that game as well. The Minnesota Vikings went out there and they dominated that game as I predicted. I kind of expected them to do that. Considering that the Houston Texans roster, with Brock Osweiler and Lamar Miller are a little bit overrated. They got big contracts, but there were big mistakes, in terms of signing them and putting big expectations on them. Neither one of them were great players before they got to Houston. So, you putting big money in their pocket ain't gonna make them great players now.
Well, speaking of the Vikings, and we're talking about predictions here. Of course, we both picked Minnesota, but I don't know if you guys caught my Fantasy Fulfilled episode where I was saying do not start Kyle Rudolph. It really is not so much because J.J. Watt is gone, as a lot of people think it is. Of course, he's shaking up the division rankings and how the division can play out. But it is essentially because of Houston's offense. Before yesterday, and I think it had a lot to do with maybe their defense was tired too. Their pass defense has really been pretty good with that secondary, and then also Diggs didn't play with the injury, so I was like, I didn't know that before I shot that episode of Fantasy Fulfilled that Diggs wasn't even playing, but I'm like, oh, okay, so they're really going to take Kyle Rudolph out of the game in this instance. And if you would have told me that Kyle Rudolph only had 2 catches for 15 yards and no touchdowns, and then no AP and no Teddy Bridgewater, I'm kind of like, well, how in the world could Minnesota have won? But that's the thing. When you're a team like this, and they're going into a bye week for week 6, so that undefeated record will be secured for definitely at least
one additional week.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, just on paper, if you would have told me Kyle Rudolph only had 2 catches and 15 yards and no touchdowns, I would have questioned how in the world did they win this game. Again, no Teddy Bridgewater, no Adrian Peterson. But what we're seeing in this Vikings team is a very resilient team. It's like, what's that old saying? They take a licking and they keep on ticking or whatever.
Yep.
No Diggs. Rudolph was basically a non-factor. And shout-outs to Eugene, by the way. My homie Eugene, who called me as soon as he saw the episode. He was like, are you kidding me about Kyle Rudolph? I said, watch what I tell you. So, yeah, shout-outs to you because I tried to tell you, and I hope you didn't put him in your fantasy lineup because if you did, good luck with that, bruh. In my Jay-Z voice on trying to win fantasy this week. But anyway, I just really am very impressed with Minnesota. There's some games on the schedule that they could lose as well, but I really think that I believe in Minnesota as a legitimate team, still a little bit more than I believe in Atlanta. I'll give you Atlanta. And the thing, like when you mentioned that they have these huge AFC West wins, they beat both of y'all at home. They beat Oakland in Oakland, and they beat Denver in Denver. And Denver's the Super Bowl champs. And as much as I still want to believe in Atlanta, I can't all the way do it yet because I just kind of feel like, because I remember Atlanta had started off like 5-1 before or 6-0 a few years ago. Of course, a totally different team, different personnel with the coaching staff and stuff. Maybe about like week 10 or week 11, I still am not fully, it's not to take anything from Atlanta, but I'm just basing it off of, okay, like the Giants, for example. I know the Giants are losing here, but I've seen the Giants get in the playoffs and win all 3 games on the road and win a Super Bowl. So history would indicate to me that they could possibly do that again. I've seen Atlanta have meltdowns. So history to me could prove that it will happen again. Give me to about week what's this, week 5 just concluded. Give me to about week 8, because the jury's still out for me on Atlanta. I think that the division, the Saints, of course, were off this week. I think the division is also still going to make some adjustments. And we know that one of the teams have to win unless they tie. We know that one of the teams have to win tonight between Carolina and Tampa. And I think that whichever of those teams win, which on a previous episode you've already picked Tampa, and I've picked Carolina. But I think that whichever one of those teams wins tonight, they're going to start, like, connecting wins. They're going to start, like, connecting the dots and reeling off some consecutive wins. Plus, Carolina goes and plays New Orleans in New Orleans next week. So that's another chance to kind of make back up for the division. Or they could lose both, or they could win one and lose the other. Again, I'm still not all the way sold on Atlanta. I'm a lot more convinced with Minnesota at this point in time. But these were big wins by both of those teams. Detroit knocking off the undefeated Eagles, and with the Falcons knocking off the undefeated Broncos. And then, of course, again, with the Packers coming off of a bye week and winning against the Giants and trying to keep pace with the still lone undefeated team in the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings. And as we mentioned, tonight's game, Monday Night Football, primetime, we have a huge divisional game with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers. Again, we're really not going to go over so much of who we think is going to win and why. We've already talked about that, but just to reiterate, Guru picked Tampa on the road. I picked Carolina. But what we didn't get to talk about, again, with Hurricane Matthew, Ben Wickery has been cut from the Panthers since then. So there's a lot of up in arms from fans, questions, confusion, aggravation, to where it's just kind of like people trying to figure out what Carolina is doing. And I think that they were trying to make a huge statement. But Ben Wickery is a guy who was looking pretty solid, coming in. He's a young corner, and actually he was the veteran of the corners. Pretty much the veteran with Peanut Tillman retiring. Josh Norman, of course, gone to Washington. And then they drafted rookies in the second, third, and fifth round of the draft earlier this spring. So it's kind of like, what in the world? Why did Carolina do that? But we know what happened the previous week, what Julio Jones and Matt Ryan did in Atlanta with the 300-plus yards from Jones, the 500-plus yards from Ryan. But to me, Carolina really didn't make the necessary adjustments to try to do a little bit of prevention on that. But what do you think the statement that Carolina is making with cutting Ben Wickery and going into tonight's game? I mean, do you see any type of improvement? What are you expecting from the secondary tonight, who is one man down, and what is the statement that Carolina is trying to make here going forward through the rest of the season?
Coming off of a game like that, where, a guy gets his, like, all-time career high, maybe even, like, the most ever receiving yards. I know he's probably, like, at least got to be in the top 5 of most ever receiving yards for a player in a game. Like 300 yards in a receiving game is ridiculous. Like, that's not something that, you can just take lightly and say, oh, that's Julio Jones. Even though people making it seem as if, it's just, Julio Jones. That's just another day at the office. That's not just another day at the office. 300 yards is that's like NFL star playing in a Pop Warner game, So, I would say it was that embarrassing. So, that's going to have some type of residual effect. And I think the Panthers, they maybe felt that Ben Wickery, was the problem, but I don't necessarily think he's the problem. I think that last year as a nickel corner, he was one of the best in the league. Now you're playing him maybe on the outside. He just wasn't, equipped to play that position. Or you're just maybe not ready to play that position. A lot of times corners take 2 or 3 years to get better. David Amerson, a corner for the Oakland Raiders right now, is a great example of that.
Oh, that's biased.
Well, it's a great example, because, a lot of Washington Redskin fans had basically dug the man's grave, They said that the man was not going to be a good player. He was a second-round pick for them. And, they were happy to get rid of him. And
what I meant was, you're right, but it's just harder for me to accept that from you because you're an Oakland fan. I wish somebody else off the streets had said that. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that, it just takes, if you look back in history, me being an Oakland Raiders fan, I guess it's easier for me to give Oakland Raider examples. But corners generally take 2 or 3 years, generally 3, sometimes even 3 to 4 years, to come around, to really develop into who they're going to be. So, I don't think that Ben Wickery was given a fair shake on that deal. And I think that, the Panthers are in trouble. This is a team that's in trouble. Whenever you start seeing panic moves, like that lets you know that this is a team that's in desperation. They're trying to find a way out of this struggle that they're in right now. And I think that, the tonight against Tampa is, the outlook doesn't look that great because they've got another great coming in. Mike Evans has been elite every week this season. I would say that they definitely got some concern with having to defend against Mike Evans tonight. So I think that, they got problems to figure out, and they better figure them out quick.
Well, I was just really I just feel like that move was very drastic. Like, you couldn't have benched him, you couldn't have switched his positions and things like that. Actually releasing him and cutting him, I just thought, like, whoa, that's just a little bit too much. The fact that you're playing in a division with pass happy quarterbacks, I mean, you have to play Matt Ryan one more time. Drew Brees, that's the type of offense they run. They are pass first and run only if you have to, kind of thing. I mean, even if they're up in a game, they really don't run the ball that much to try to stop the clock. They're going up, they're a pass happy team. And then with Tampa, with Winston being in his second year and him evolving and growing another year, the development of him, their mentality is also to incorporate some passing. So I just really am floored with Carolina doing such a thing. Again, if you play in a division where where offenses more so want to run the ball first, like, the Jets, for example, their mentality is they want to run the ball and play defense. The Bills, they want to run the ball and play defense. This is twice every season that you're playing Jameis Winston, who's going to throw, Drew Brees, who's going to throw, Matt Ryan, who's going to throw. And I'm like, I just really am shocked to the core of me that you guys cut this guy. And plus, he was actually developing. He had a bad game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But he has shown some promise as well. And I just really think, like you said, that was a panic move. But if it makes Carolina, the organization, and Panthers fans feel any better, hey, the Bills pulled a panic move earlier this season by firing their offensive coordinator, despite the fact that they had rung up 31 points on the Jets at that time. You would think, like, the guy's job safety, there would be some security if you put up 31 points. But they fired him. The Bills have gone on to reel off a couple of big wins. They beat New England, even though New England didn't have Tom Brady at the time. But here's the kicker. They beat New England in New England. And that's huge. And they get to play New England again, but they get them up in Orchard Park. So that's a plus there. They've also beat the Cardinals. They won that one at home. But still, a Cardinals team that had just come from the NFC Championship game last year. And then they go out to the West Coast yesterday, and they beat the Rams.
The division leading Rams.
Also, the other thing about the Rams, the Rams have been playing very, very solid defense all season. But the Bills put up, quite a few points.
30.
Yeah, they put up 30 plus on them. So the Bills have had 2 huge road wins and a home win. 3 consecutive wins since they pulled that panic move of firing the offensive coordinator, and things have turned around for them. So maybe Carolina, again, I'm just telling you this. I'm not saying that's necessarily what's going to happen with you, because this is like a huge feat to overcome. I just want to try to make some lemonade out of lemons here. And the lemonade ain't necessarily as good as Beyonce's in this particular instance, but again, maybe it's like some iced tea Geico lemonade commercial. I don't know, but again, I'm just trying to look more of a positive, be optimistic on this. So maybe you guys can dig yourself out of the hole. But we will see, and good luck to both teams tonight. We'll definitely be monitoring that game. Some of the other games that we witnessed yesterday, as a Steelers fan, and like you had alluded to, you were very grateful that Atlanta beat Denver. And as a Steelers fan, I was very grateful that everybody else in my division lost. Like, thank you Patriots, which is a team I despise. And thank you Cowboys, which is another team that I despise. And thank you Redskins, which is a team I really don't have beef with. Plus, we already beat y'all. Nan, boo-boo. Plus, I'll be in Washington, D.C. next week on Good Morning Washington, talking about the Redskins and Eagles game and discussing my book. So I have no ill will to the Redskins. Oh, I'm going to get some tickets too, by the way. Oh, yeah. But anyway, so I have no ill will towards the Redskins. But thank you as well for knocking off the Ravens. So I was very, very happy and thoroughly impressed with what my team did as well. And I know that the Jets are in a predicament where they're underachieving a lot. Unfortunately, though, there was a call that people are kind of questioning Todd Bowles about, unfortunately, because I'm a big Todd Bowles fan, and this is only his second year with the Jets. They reeled off a 10-6 record last year. The only reason why they missed the playoffs was because they lost that Week 17 game, and essentially that's how the Steelers got in. They won their game Week 17, but because the Jets lost, that's how they got in. I was expecting the Steelers to win today, don't get me wrong. I knew for fantasy football owners, as I had mentioned on the episode of Fantasy for Phil, don't start Ryan Fitzpatrick because he was going to get grounded, and he did. But unfortunately, there's like controversy surrounding Todd Bowles and his play calling when there was 7 minutes and 36 seconds left in the game, and it was 4th and 2. The Steelers were up 24-13. again, 4th and 2, and instead of punting, Todd Bowles called a shovel pass on it. And of course, it ended up being a turnover on downs. And he's hearing about it now. And I mean, to the point to where people are very disgruntled. They want the guy fired. I'm not even going to say my real reason why I think that people are calling for him to be fired. But anyway, with the 1-4 record, I can kind of understand that. But, I'm real heavy on coaches just getting there. Like, sometimes they need a little bit more time. And the fact that the Jets have only had one divisional game, and they won it already. So let's just see how the rest of the division stuff plays out. Because you could have a 10-6 record, which of course is way above 500, and 10-6 can usually get you in the playoffs. But if your 6 losses is against your division, let's not get carried away here, people. We're 5 weeks into the season. Again, the guy just got there last year. He had the 10-6 record last year. Week 17 is the only reason why he didn't get in the playoffs. They didn't have Darrelle Revis. They didn't have Eric Decker. Matt Forte is coming off being carted off the field last week against Seattle. Of course, we know Ryan Fitzpatrick is having his struggles. A guy got hurt. I can't think of his name right now. He got hurt with one of Sammy Coates' touchdowns. He got hurt. I think it's Harris. But anyway, yeah, matter of fact, I think it was David Harris. I think that's who it was. And he's a huge linebacker, yeah, for them. Let's just pump our brakes a little bit. Let's let Bowles, let him make some adjustments. Maybe let's revisit this towards the end of the season. Let's just see how the guy does, especially with the division games. And let's take our time on this. Yeah, again, it was a very big screw up, but not enough at this point in time, 5 weeks into his second year as head coach. This is not the time to be trying to get rid of him.
There was going to be a backlash at some point, because this is New York.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this is New York and the expectations were high for the New York Jets this season, considering that they did have that 10-6 record last season. The fans are very disappointed, as is any other, person, a pundit who was looking from afar at the New York Jets roster. Because when you look at the makeup of this roster, they've got Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, even though he, like you say, he just got hurt. And on defense, you got Muhammad Wilkerson, Leonard Williams, Sheldon Richardson, all this talent. And this is talent that, I don't even think Rex even had that much talent on the defensive side of the ball when he was coaching the New York Jets, and they were still able to be successful.
Oh, no, that was gangrene back then.
They were gangrene, but that defensive line wasn't that nasty. Like, they got 3 Pro Bowlers. I mean, I'm willing to go that far right now. That front, the Leonard Williams, even though this is only, year 2, Leonard Williams is playing like a Pro Bowler this year. Sheldon Richardson and Muhammad Wilkerson were already Pro Bowlers.
I might definitely think their offense is better now, but I don't know about that defense. We might have to come back to that one.
I think that Rex is a savant. I think that he takes less and does more with it. Right now, you look at the Buffalo Bills, for instance. They're down their 2 elite playmakers that they got in the draft. They didn't have Marcel Darius when they started reeling off these wins. The defense has been playing much, much better the last 3 weeks. So that tells you that Rex went in and figured out what was wrong and fixed it. The New York Jets, they did have Darrelle Revis, they did have Antonio Cromartie, but if you look back at those Jets teams, they didn't have one player who had over 10 sacks. It was always spread out all over the place. So that lets you know that Rex system, kind of allowed for guys to be elite.
But what's wrong with defenders having that spread around? Because I recall those Giants Super Bowls, they had to give Eli the MVP because everybody on the defense just did so well. Like, Michael Strahan did stuff, OCU and Ura did stuff, Justin Tuck did stuff. So it was spread out then. And they won. So I don't know, why do you have to have somebody have 10 sacks? Why can't somebody have 5 and somebody else have 7 and somebody else have 6? I don't know. Why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, but the thing about it is that every time you look at an elite defense, there's, generally one guy who is a home run hitter. And then, there's usually another couple guys who are playing off of that steam from the head knocker, and they're getting a lot of numbers as well. Now, generally, if you look at the Baltimore Ravens defense when they won the Super Bowl, for instance, Terrell Suggs was that guy. Terrell Suggs was the guy with 15 sacks in a season. And then you look on the other side, with Douglas, and they had Ray Lewis and all those other guys, you know what I'm saying? Those guys were all making plays all over the place. Like, they had playmakers all over the place. You look at, the Minnesota Vikings team this season. You look at Danielle Hunter. You look at Everson Griffin. You look at Robeson. You look at, Anthony Barr. You look at all those guys like that. Those guys all over the place making plays.
Exactly.
Now, and there's going to be probably 3 guys with 10 sacks on the Vikings this year. That's the point I'm making. It's going to probably be 3, not just 1.
But all I'm saying is that's not necessary. Like, you don't have to have, because you could still be a complete all-around defense. You could still be an elite defense without having somebody always have 10 sacks or 15 sacks and stuff like that. Because, again, the Giants were able to do that season and in that Super Bowl, that playoff run.
That's not accurate, because Michael Strahan, Osi Umenyiora, and Justin Tuck all had over 10 sacks that season.
No. But what I'm saying is, I mean that you don't have to have that. That's my point. Like, everybody can kind of spread stuff around. And even if, like, for example, Olivier Vernon last night in that Green Bay game, I mean, he hasn't really gotten, not even last night, just this season, he really hasn't had the sack yet, but he's been able to stop the run. So he's still been successful. So I'm just saying, I just feel like there's other elements to being an elite defense and being able to be successful. Like, the focal point doesn't have to necessarily be on just the sacks. Like, you could still do other things well in defense in order to be successful and in order to be elite. Like, I just don't agree that you have to have those 10 sacks. Again, because looking at those Super Bowls with the Giants, everybody played a part. There was no man that really stuck out. They couldn't even give it to one person on the defense. Eli, really, that first one especially, I mean, you didn't necessarily have to give it. Of course, they had that play with the David Tyree and stuff like that. They've had those types of plays with the Super Bowl and then the fade route to Plexico. But the defense really won those championships. And everybody did their part. It was just something that they did that just stuck out like a sore thumb. It was a collective effort. And there really wasn't just one guy that stood out or one guy that had like all the stats and like he's the best thing that happened to the defense. So I don't know. I just feel like stuff could still just kind of be done collectively and there still be success. We talked about as well, I think we kind of emphasized a lot of the surprises that we saw. Again, the Falcons winning on the road, knocking off an undefeated team. The Eagles winning. The Lions winning, knocking off an undefeated team. So those are kind of like our surprises. What about your week of the week? WEAK of the WEEK. What were the disappointments for you as we looked at what happened over the week 5 Thursday night, if you want to include that as well, in the Sunday games?
My week of the week for week 5 is the Cincinnati Bengals. My expectations for the Bengals this week were that they were going to come out here and find a way to win this game. Considering they started off the season struggling a little bit, and we all understand that injuries are part of the game. Injuries would derail any team's, hopes of being able to be a great team in any sport for that matter. However, Burfict being back on the field, and with them having Michael Johnson and Carlos Dunlap and Carlos Dansby and Vincent Ray, I mean, all this talent up there on the front 7, it doesn't even really make sense that they couldn't stop the run in that game yesterday. Ezekiel Elliott just seemed like he just was doing whatever he wanted to do in that game. And he kept gashing them for big play after big play. Now, mind you, the quarterback did a good job. Dak Prescott, he did a pretty good job of, game managing and not making any errors. Again, another game with no turnovers from Dak Prescott. I think he did have a sack fumble, but he did not throw an interception. So another game with no interceptions. That's a better way to put it. The Cincinnati Bengals, for all that talent on that defense, I named plenty of them just now. Geno Atkins, you could just keep going on down this list and talking about the talent that's on this team and gush about them because, I'm sure many defensive coordinators around the league would love to have that front 7.
Right.
So I don't quite understand how this team came up short in this game. And maybe I am underestimating how good Ezekiel Elliott was, before this game. But I expected for Cincinnati's defense to find a way to be able to bottle this man up and, make it to where, the game, was more of a hard-fought, low-scoring, defensive, nasty contest, which, basically bodes well for the Cincinnati Bengals as a team because that's the type of games they like to play and win.
And you still rolling with them to win the division despite the loss yesterday?
I still definitely like the Cincinnati Bengals to win the division. I think that they are going to reel off some wins at some point. Okay. Tyler Eifert's going to come back. That offense is going to play a little bit better football. And Andy Dalton didn't play that bad today, but it just wasn't enough. Too little, too late. In the fourth quarter, you finally started getting some type of rhythm going. That's a testament to the Dallas defense as well. I did state that before this game that the Dallas defense had been playing good football, and they have. They've been playing very good football. They haven't been putting up the huge numbers, but they've been playing very good football as well. I definitely think that that's a testament to the Dallas Cowboys defense, but I think that Andy Dalton and the Bengals are going to reel off some wins at some point. 3 losses this early in the season doesn't mean that much.
Gotcha. And then, like you said, Dalton didn't play too bad, but it just had more to do with Cincinnati's defense not being able to make those stops, is it more so than it was Cincinnati's offense not being able to put up points. And it doesn't get any easier for Cincinnati as they play the New England Patriots next, but this is another one of those games where I'm going to put in my early bid for a tie since I didn't get it with the Cincinnati and Dallas on yesterday. Of course, I'm not a fan of either one of those teams, being a Steelers fan. I'm definitely not a fan of the Patriots or the Bengals once again as we go into Week 6. So I'm going to put in an early request for that tie. We'll talk about that again as we get closer to Week 6 once it kicks off later on our podcast for the week. And I agree with you. Cincinnati definitely was a contender for Week of the Week honors. I definitely agree with you, but I'm going to go to last night's game, and I'm going to give the Week of the Week honor to the New York Giants. I know that you guys have had 2 tough games traveling to NFC North opponents in Minnesota and in Green Bay the past couple of weeks, but you guys have lost 3 straight, and you haven't gone to the playoffs for 4 straight years, so you're reverting back to the New York Miniatures. And with the offseason that you had, all the money that you spent on that defensive front and that secondary, you got 4 key players and spent like $100 million in guaranteed money. Then there's no way that you guys should be in this predicament of losing 3 straight. Then you go out and get a coach who, unlike Cleveland, where they went and hired a complete external coach. Hugh Jackson, of course, was the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. So then he comes into the Cleveland Browns organization. You hired a coach who had been working with your organization for the past 2 years. He had been Eli's offensive coordinator the past 2 years. Eli's turnovers had gone down. His accuracy had gone up. So it's essentially he got promoted. You didn't hire an outside coach. So there's familiarity. There's continuity there. And you mean to tell me that you still want to lose 3 straight? Again, I know you've had tough opponents these past couple of weeks, but you have blown opportunities in winning these games. It's not like these teams are just like you didn't stand a chance. Eli, you blew a lot of opportunities last night. You missed a whole bunch of open receivers. You were inaccurate last night as well. Odell actually saved you with that touchdown last night. I mean, by him being able to have the awareness of not putting his heel down, because he would have been out of bounds otherwise and it would not have been a touchdown. He saved you on that. I know you took a lick and everything, but there was a lack of accuracy from you in last night's contest against the Packers. Then even last week, same thing. You had a chance against the Vikings, but you're just not being consistent and being accurate. And then Eli, with the receiving core that you have in Sterling, Victor Cruz is back, so he could at least be very effective as a slot receiver. And then you have Odell. I mean, I just cannot really believe how bad it has looked for the Giants this year. Not just in last night's loss, not just in losing to Minnesota last week, but just the entire season in losing 3 straight. And then you had a divisional loss against the Redskins at home as well. So you guys get my Week of the Week honors, definitely. I hope it gets better for you, because I have picked you all to win the division. It had a lot to do with how you guys kind of got your defensive front and things back intact. I was thinking that might be the reason. Then with you hiring Ben McAdoo internally and with Victor Cruz coming back healthy, there shouldn't be any problems in your offense. But you put up 16 points last night, and 9 of them were from your field goal kicker. Where's the offense? You've got to do better. You really do. The defense is honestly looking like it's not worth the money. Like they're going to have to start forfeiting some checks or something, because there has not been a real grand slam performance from this $100 million defense. You definitely get my Week of the Week honors as a result. And the guru, of course, picked the Bengals. Thank God for the safety of a lot of the Jacksonville residents. Jacksonville, Florida lives. As you all may or may not know, but every Saturday since football season has started, I've been very blessed and grateful, and featured on a Jacksonville radio station, 107.9, the Antonio Johnson Show. And I've been like making picks and the upsets of the week and saying how I think Jacksonville would fare the week of their games. And then the guy, Mr. Johnson, he's a Cowboys fan, so he always wants me to also talk about his Cowboys as well. But because Hurricane Matthew made its landfall in Jacksonville, Florida, was definitely under the influence of that. I was praying with Mr. Johnson on Friday. That was the 7th, and that was also his birthday. And we were praying together, and again, I'm like, wow, Matthew was really trying it on your birthday. Again, we were praying, and he was actually going live and showing a lot of the footage of what Jacksonville was experiencing at this time. And it was very devastating and borderline tumultuous, and I really was like, wow, I can't believe he's actually recording footage, and he was going out on the porch and doing so. But thank God that they were spared and they were saved. So I just automatically thought, because of Hurricane Matthew, I'm not going to be on the show on Saturday. I was not expecting and completely understood why. So I check in with Mr. Johnson the day after his birthday, Saturday the 8th, to see how things were, because by then it was aftermath. The storm had moved on up the coast. So I go to Mr. Johnson, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? This, that, and the third. I'm sure that you're at home in the bed or something like that. I say, you're probably sleeping in. And his response was, are you crazy? I'm going to my show today, honey. Football is therapeutic for me. Matthew tried it on my birthday, but this is the after party. Matthew is not getting ready to ruin my birthday weekend. And it was just amazing to see that his spirits were up, and he went on to work and did his show. What tripped me out even more, like I said, I just automatically said, okay, I'm not doing a show. I was like, I'm not doing the show in Jacksonville. There's no way that I'm doing the show being on there. He's not going to work. I'm not going to be on there. It bugged me out because the only reason why he didn't have me on the show this week was because Jacksonville had a bye. I mean, I was way off. I thought, like, with that storm, it ain't gonna happen. Like, the focus is to get the power back on and clean the streets. No, he went to work. And so I'm just really amazed at Mr. Johnson's spirit. Again, very grateful for him anyway from the jump, but just really amazed. He really tickled my funny bone on that one, and thinking that, like, no, Matthew's not ruining my birthday weekend. Shoot, this is the after party. He was like, God spared me, so I'm out here. So I'm very glad again that Jacksonville was able to pull through, because gosh, it looked really, really bad. That you guys prevailed. You were definitely in my thoughts, and again, I'm very thankful for the support that I have gotten from you all. And I will talk to you all again on this Saturday. All right, so I guess that's going to do it for this installment of the Jock and Jill podcast. Again, we send out our love, air hugs, virtual hugs, podcast hugs to all those involved with Hurricane Matthew. And we hope that you guys are recovering, recuperating. Again, also to your family as well, with them being in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Fayetteville being affected as well. Anything that you want to let the people know? I know this weekend, any of the projects we had going on, the weather kind of suspended a lot of things. But A&T Homecoming's coming up, for example. Homecoming season's coming for a lot of HBCUs around here. So you're open and available for any type of recording of the comedy shows, any type of footage people need at the games, things like that. So let them know how they can reach you.
Absolutely. Like us on Cold Coffee TV on Facebook. Follow us at Cold Coffee TV on Twitter. Yeah, subscribe to us at Cold Coffee TV on YouTube. A special shout out to all of our listeners on SoundCloud. I really appreciate, and notice that, you guys have been coming over and checking out the podcast every day, and we really appreciate that support. Be sure to check out Your Fantasy Fulfilled Weekly, featuring your girl Joan Madden, the Gridiron Goddess, who drops those gems for y'all guys every week. Run with us or run from us. You know the motto.
And I'm your girl Latasha Miles, aka Joan Madden, the Gridiron Goddess. I can be reached on Twitter and IG at she_SPN. Again, at she_SPN. Facebook under Latasha Joan Madden Miles. Again, Latasha Joan Madden Miles on Facebook, and the YouTube channel, which is She SP in the Network. Again, that's She SP in the Network on YouTube. And I have a book out called When Football Season Turns You Into His Side Chick, available on CreateSpace and Amazon.com. And yeah, like he said, with my episodes of Your Fantasy Fulfilled, but I couldn't do those without him. I'm just the spokesperson for it. I'm just the voice that you hear and the person that you see. But all that behind the scenes work, all those graphics and photos and everything that you see, that's brought to you by this guy here, the guru. So I'd be lost without him. I appreciate you just as much. And you guys, you see the projects and the work that he's doing. So for any of your needs and services, bar mitzvahs, birthday parties, photographs, weddings, anything of that nature, he is your one-stop shop destination. All right, so again, look us up, hit us up on all the social medias. Continue to support us. We are very grateful. We will catch you guys next time, and we're out.